Welcome, everyone. My name is Ryan. For those of you who don't know me, I think I might have met a few folks at events. I lead the partnerships and activation team here at Plooto. And yeah, super excited to talk about the topic today of how to select an app. We are an app or technology, so we often help customers sort through this challenge or this question. And we have an awesome panel. Super fortunate to have a couple of leaders from firms or accounting and bookkeeping firms with us today. So that's Emma Fougere and Jules Hawkins, who will be sharing their insights. And I think what's really cool today is we actually have Kyle Davis and Anthony from Financial Sense and Wagepoint, who are joining us from the other side of things. So you'll get a really good picture, I think, of like, as a buyer, what are other people thinking about as they go through this process from Emma and Jules? And then Anthony and Kyle, who've maybe talked to hundreds, thousands maybe of customers, what they're hearing from people. So they're kind of a amalgamation of all those different questions, and super excited to hear their side of things as well. So I'll let them introduce themselves a little more in just a second. But I'm just going to take us through a quick agenda for today. It's not going to be me just talking for 45 minutes to an hour. It's actually going to be you hearing from some of these leaders and folks who are well-versed in the industry that you can learn from. So with that, I'll jump into the agenda. So we'll start off with those introductions. I'll actually jump into this idea of app fatigue because I think actually when Bianca and I first chatted about the app pack, and Bianca had talked about app fatigue as one of the reasons for starting this, to how do we like cut through the clutter of all the different apps out there. That was one of the things that we, that spurred this idea for this webinar series. So it's super cool to actually have a webinar focused on this. So we'll actually quantify that app fatigue. Why do we actually feel that way in our kind of work life, but beyond that too. We'll talk about, and this is where I think we'll get the panelists to actually jump in and talk about the general areas who, as leaders at their firm, what are the decisions, the things that they considered as they went through the process of choosing their app stack or tech stack. And then we'll actually go into a little bit more of a tactical checklist. I've shared it with the panelists today, but they haven't shared any feedback, which I think is good because I want to get their thoughts, and it'll be live and authentic. So, we have some baseline questions meant to be as a starting ground for anyone to kind of build their own checklist, their own criteria when they look for an app and build their own process. And then lastly, I think a lot of folks, as they go through choosing an app, they'll often do a demo. They'll talk to someone from that technology partner. And what should you be looking for after the demo? I find that people don't often ask for resources. We offer them. And then they're like, oh, that was actually super helpful. So what can you proactively maybe ask for? So that you're walking away from those conversations really well equipped to make those decisions about what tech stack to choose for your firm. And then lastly, want to leave about 5 to 10 minutes for some Q&A. Feel free to post them in the chat, and then we'll go through them at the end. Like I said, you have an awesome set of panelists with a lot of knowledge and industry experience. I want to say years, decades, potentially between all the panelists here. So really use that opportunity to pick their brains a little bit more. So that being said, I'm going to move over to these introductions. So we'll go from left to right. So I'll actually have Jules introduce himself, and then Kyle, Emma, and Anthony. And I've actually got a question. So as you talk a little about you and your background, I'd love for you to wrap up just at the end. So for Jules and Emma, the question I would like you guys to answer is, what does your tech stack look like today? And in choosing that tech stack, whether it was yourself or other folks at your firm, how many demos or vendors did you look at before you maybe narrowed it down to those 10 or 12 core apps or whatever it may be? Would just like take us through a little bit about that process, and then where you guys are today in terms of what your tech stack looks like. So that's for Jules and Emma. For Kyle and Anthony, the question I have for you guys is, tell us a little bit about your life and your work, and how many customers would you say you talk to on average per month? How many demos are you doing? Just give us a sense of how many different firms you might be talking to, and then when you're talking to those firms, how many different apps are they considering? When they're looking at Wagepoint or Financial Sense, how many other apps might they be looking at? So hopefully that's not too much. But with that, I will pass it over to Jules and then have him introduce himself.
Thank you, Ryan. So glad to be here. Hello, everybody. My name is Jules Hawkins. As you can tell, I'm not originally a Canadian CPA, but I do hold my Canadian CPA. My wife, Alison, and I founded Hawkins & Co. Accounting, which is physically based in Windsor. We founded that about 10 years ago. We're just coming up to the 10th year anniversary, and we have 14 people, of whom about 9 are in Ontario, 3 are in BC, and 2 are in the Philippines. We started as what you might call a traditional CPA firm, focused on year-ends, tax returns, things like that. And fairly quickly, as the technology was really starting to come out, we really started to pivot more to turning ourselves into what you might could call client outsourced finance functions. So we work essentially for owner-managed businesses, and the way we call it is we democratize financial intelligence. We're giving them a finance function using us essentially in the various tech stack that gives them the financial information that typically is not available to your smaller owner managed business. So they will outsource the bookkeeping to that to us, and in exchange for that, we take care of all of the compliance and advice as well, and so forth. As far as our tech stack goes, we have internal and external. For client facing, we have what I'd imagine everybody's got similar sort of similar items in there. So for us, we are a Xero house. So we use Xero and we reinforce that with Dext or HubDoc. We use Wagepoint and Plooto extensively, and Float is one that's coming up and we're using more and more as well. So that's what you might call across the board for clients. Obviously, you're also going to have client-specific ones depending on their industry. So Touch Bistro or Square for restaurants, Tradeify for contractors, and so forth. Internally, we use Google Suite. We use ClickUp for workflow management, with apologies to Anthony. QuickBooks Time, iFirm, Dropbox, a range of things. We've got probably about 6 or 7 core internal-facing apps. How many demos have we done? Lost count. Couldn't tell you. We spread it amongst the team, but it's well into the hundreds over the past few years.
Cool. That's 100. I want to say I counted about 15 to 20 different apps. So you did about 100 demos. It's like a 5-to-1 ratio, roughly, before you made that decision. Cool. And are you, Jules, out of curiosity, are you consistently demoing new products? Do you kind of have your tech stack and you're like, it works, don't fix it? What's your firm's maybe approach to that?
I would say that now we've got the core, which in our case, Xero, Dext, HubDoc, Wagepoint, Plooto, Float, etc. I'd say now we have a core. That's definitely, we know how that works, and we're exploring how to take better advantage of those and go deeper dive into them. We are always curious just to see if there are new ones up and coming, and we're also, as we're meeting new people, finding more cool apps and ones that we can trial. A lot of those are industry specific. But yeah, we're always on the lookout. But now those clients are in steady state. We're not going to mess with it if it works and they're happy with it, and if we're happy with it.
Cool. Awesome. I'll let you pass it over to Emma just to keep the kind of topic the same a little bit, and then Kyle and Anthony afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Emma. I am VP of Client Services and Product at Connect CPA. Connect CPA was founded around 2014. The co-founders had the idea that accounting should be done differently, and we've been growing ever since. I personally joined Connect CPA in 2018. We're about, or actually over 100 employees now, so lots of growth, but choosing an app is very important for that growth, just being able to grow and scale with your clients. So I'm really excited to chat today about the topic. And the services we provide bookkeeping, controllership, payroll, payables, technology, and corporate tax compliance as well. In terms of our tech stack, I'm very similar to Jules with what we use. We're also a Xero shop. So we use Dex as our receipt management tool alongside of that. Also expanding onto flow cards for it's really great virtual credit card application, and allows for those kind of high growth companies to scale, and utilizing Plooto heavily for AP management and Wagepoint as well on the payroll side. So that is our primary tech stack that we implement with most of our clients. And then alongside that, we also have a lot of e-commerce based clients in which we use A2X, and of course other industry specific add-ons depending on the client that we're servicing. So internally, we also use ClickUp as our task management tool and rely on that heavily just to keep track of our clients and keep everything organized on that end. We use Podio as a CRM, and of course just have standard kind of add-ons too for internal communication, Slack, Zoom, ShareFile to securely share documents between clients. In terms of the demo side, I would say demos are always ongoing. We typically have, I would say, at least one app demo a week. And it's not always new client or new applications that are upcoming. It's also just keeping current with applications you may have met a year ago that are continuously doing product improvements. So just keeping in the know of the existing apps that may be growing and expanding, as well as new and emerging ones as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's an important point. Like, and we'll actually talk about that, I think, in terms of that checklist is like, you want to app partner technology that's not going to be stagnant, that's going to evolve as your firm evolves and with the times. So it makes a lot of sense there. Yeah, you're sometimes just re-demoing an existing product. Also, what I found is the world of accounting and bookkeeping is so complex that, in your first demo with a product, you're actually not taking away everything that it could possibly do. You're probably going to focus on one area that, is your biggest pain point, but then as you use it, you might learn about different areas. So super, super cool here. Also, Connect CPA, the most famous client from you guys for me is the Peak.
Oh, yes.
The story of how I got acquired recently, and I read every morning. I love that. So thank you for helping them get their finances in order and make sure that they're bringing me great content every morning as I eat my breakfast.
Oh, that's great. Awesome.
Cool. All right, I'll pass it over to Kyle and then Anthony.
Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here. My name's Kyle Davis. I'm one of the sales managers here at Wagepoint. I've been with Wagepoint for roughly 4.5 years now. I've done everything from a sales rep to a team lead, and now been a sales manager for coming on 2 years. In terms of Wagepoint itself, we try to pride ourselves on being the friendliest payroll provider out there, and just try to be as real as we could be and speak to people how they would like to be speaking to, or we would like to be speaking to in that matter. Try to be consultative and not really salesy. It's just, how can we help you, and if it's a fit, that's great, and if not, obviously that's unfortunate, but we still wish you the best of luck in finding what is the right fit for you guys moving forward. In terms of demos, I mean, over the years since I started at Wagepoint, I've probably done thousands of demos. Just every day, my team and we have a couple different branches within Wagepoint. There's net new clients reaching out, contact us, or creating accounts, looking for information that we then have demos booked every week, on the daily. So always connecting with clients, always trying to show them the platform as much as we can, and trying to find what it is that led them to reach out initially, and how we can jump in and help them with those needs.
Cool.
Currently, Wagepoint has over 23,000 customers, which has come a long way since when I first started. And I believe one of the questions was, what other avenues are clients looking for when they do come to us? Typically, that would surround time tracking or HR. We've actually just recently in the last year acquired a time tracking and HR company as well. So we're making them our own now, and it just shows the growth that we've experienced to be in a position to be acquiring companies, and then in turn, creating our own products to kind of go off of the main function we operate with in payroll, but understanding time and HR are both critical needs for clients we work with.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. Anthony?
Always forget to hit the unmute button. Okay, hey everyone, super excited to be here. My name is Anthony. I'm the head of customer success here at Financial Sense, and I oversee the support, onboarding, and customer success functions here. I am fairly new at Financial Sense. I started in April, and I was brought on to continue to build on these functions. And Financial Sense is a practice management solution, and we help you keep the track the status of your client work, collaborate with your team on open projects, and also organize your client information. And Financial Sense has been around since about 2019. We are fairly new in the space. However, we have done a great job on keeping in tune with our customers. We have developed a great feedback loop, an awesome social media presence. Our CEO, Sharam, is constantly in touch with customers. We do regular customer interviews, and it's been an amazing journey so far in these last few months. To While I don't do demos, I am very involved in the sales process. I do jump on a lot of consultation calls and make sure that it is a good product fit for a customer, but also to hold a discovery call to find out more about the firm, the services they provide, more information about their clients, and we develop a plan to help the customer envision what their onboarding would look like inside of Financial Sense. So I've spoken with many customers. We have a great partnership between CS and sales here at Financial Sense. Our sales team does hundreds of demos, and my team conducts about 50 to 60 onboardings, and that number is increasing month over month. So great time to be here at Financial Sense. So when it comes to how many customers I've talked to, while we do the onboardings, we also have our support interactions, but additionally our feedback loop where we get in touch with our customers, whether they have product ideas, feature suggestions, as we tend to try to keep in touch and in tune with our customers, just to make sure that we're constantly iterating on the product, that we're constantly listening to our customers, their concerns, but also to come up with better solutions within our platform.
Cool. That's awesome. Thank you both, Anthony and Kyle. I will say Financial Sense has some of the best like meme content that I see. I'm actually often sharing it in our internal Teams messages for our team because I always have a good laugh at them. But yeah, thanks so much. I'm going to actually go through this slide fairly quickly because I thought we'd be, short or go through faster than I thought. And I just want to make sure we do have a chance to really dig into like the checklist itself and areas to consider. But, when we were talking about this idea of app fatigue, like why is it actually a problem? This is a quote I found online. On the App Store and Google Play Store, there's over 5.7 million apps combined. And it's this idea that it's just like you get to a sense of burnout when you're dealing with all this. And so it's no different when we look at like the accounting and bookkeeping space. What I did is I pulled a couple software review companies, Capterra, G2 Software Advice, and looked at specifically accounting and bookkeeping products that are out there. And then I also looked at the Xero and QuickBooks app stores to see, how many different apps are there that you can choose from. And the numbers are quite staggering. Conservatively, you can find easily 500 to 1,000 products that could potentially apply to your practice. So really navigating that is, if you feel that sense of app fatigue, it's not, you're not alone, is really the takeaway. So thought these numbers were cool to share and wanted to just get that to frame that problem for folks. That being said, I'm actually going to pass it over to Jules and Emma, and I would love to hear when you guys were going through the process of selecting maybe some apps recently or the original apps. Jules was a co-founder, so it was right at the beginning. Did you guys put together a checklist? Did you have certain criteria? What were maybe the broad areas that you were looking at? As you went into those conversations? Would just love to hear generally, what were you looking for, or do you even have like a process or a criteria now that you guys go through?
I'd say we've evolved our criteria because, to be honest, 10 years ago when we were starting this, like everybody else, we didn't actually know what we were doing. We were just winging it, and there's some cool new stuff out there. We wanted to see how it worked. And then, as you saw on the previous slide, the number of people in the marketplace just exploded in terms of the things that you can have, et cetera, et cetera. So, we realized how to deal with it a bit further. It's helpful, obviously, that we've settled on the core stack and we don't plan to meddle with that because, it's not like you've just downloaded a game from the App Store and if after 5 minutes you don't like it, you can delete it. If you've embedded yourself into, for example, Wagepoint or Plooto or Zero as a core client-facing piece of software, obviously it's a painful process if you decide that you need to move away from that. And we really, really hope we don't need to for the core partners, app partners that we have. That said, we're always looking at ones who are on the periphery, and always there are more and more things. So, for example, in the area of payroll and HR related things, just to speak to Carl's point, I mean, Wagepoint, for example, does payroll really, really well. We're delighted with it, but there are always other things on to do with HR and similar. So you mentioned time tracking, you mentioned HR and so forth. So we're always in our conversations having in a conversation with clients. They're saying, well, I'd like to be able to do this, or they're doing something which is what you might call a 20th century way of doing it, and they'd really like to bring it into the 21st century. And the challenge there, with apologies to Carl, is that everybody claims that they do a lot of things. A lot of people do one or two things really, really well. We first came to Wagepoint because of the payroll side of it. I haven't had a chance to explore how good you are on things like the time tracking or the HR elements of it. So you follow what I'm saying? I'm not wishing to pick on Carl there, but that's the point. So you've got to be very cautious to say, okay, here are the things that you do offer. What's your core? What are you really good at that I can see you're really good at? And you have to be a little bit cautious about saying what are the things that you may not be so good at. For example, a lot of workflow systems claim that they're also good CRMs. They're not, so things like that. So I guess what we've got a lot better is we've definitely got a more fine-tuned, if I can use the terminology, BS detector, so to speak, and understanding when things are sales pitch as opposed to genuine, yes, this works, it's not just vaporware. And we've also realized we have to be a lot more rigorous about defining up front what are the needs we have as opposed to the wants. And if it can't meet your needs, then thank you, this was nice, have a good day.
Cool. And if you were thinking about like the questions that you're going to ask someone on a demo, like are there certain buckets that you would group them in, and what are maybe some of those buckets? Like I think pricing is obviously a big one, like you'll want to know, but are there other areas that you make sure that you ask them about or you have on your checklist?
Beg your pardon. Yeah, the checklist has evolved, a few bits. I mean, pricing is one, for example, duration of contract. Certainly you want to understand about the support, the type of support, whether or not there's a human involved in it, and so forth. Security is clearly an item because as accountants we're dealing with things like payroll people, things like financial information, there's privacy protected information. So yes, I'd say those are probably contracts, pricing, security. Integrations are definitely a key part of it as well. Do you actually play as nicely with Zero as you say you do, for example?
Right. Yeah. Cool. No, that makes a lot of sense. Emma, would love to hear from your side.
Yeah, you always want to make sure, I would say, that the problem you're trying to solve or the efficiencies you're trying to improve upon, working with that app does satisfy that. So you're able to avoid manual data input, or you're not losing your automations by working with that application that you may have with other applications that you're working with. Another thing that is very important on our accounting side, since we are accountants and analyzing data is so important, is just customizing the data that is migrating from the system to the accounting software. So if you're able to map it to different GL accounts, for example, or if you're able to map it to like tracking categories, just so that your financial data, if you're using an add-on, is coming across to your accounting system the way that you want to be able to analyze it and properly be able to understand it for your financial purposes. So those are a lot of things that I look for as well, just in the terms of integrations and add-ons as well.
Cool. And for your firm, you mentioned about 100 people now. Um, is who's making the decision to bring on the app? Who's doing is the person doing the demo different than the decision maker? And are certain people equipped with like a checklist so that they can go and do the research and then bring it to certain folks? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, it's normally kind of a group effort. It typically stems from a problem or kind of a solution that we're trying to solve. So let's just say we're having trouble with product management for certain clients. So us just kind of meeting together and figuring out a solution to address that, and then we'll kind of focus and meet with a few applications that provide that service. So typically demos are done with a few of us on the technology team to get a better understanding, and we'll revisit and kind of discuss the benefits of utilizing that app. And sometimes it's just kind of a one-off that suits that client based on their industry specific needs, or if it's more of a long-term partnership where we're going to migrate a bunch of clients to this application, then of course more people are discussed and brought into that conversation. But yeah, it's not normally just kind of an individual decision. We always kind of consider the views of other team members involved as well.
Cool. That's interesting. So you said that like sometimes there are the one-offs, like where a client has a very specific need. I guess that's like maybe a demo with a member of your team and that client.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Cool. Awesome. I think like I have a couple of things here that I think were just general areas. And I think we touched on them, integrations with your existing tech stack. You don't want to have to add another piece of software just to be able to use this software that you're adding. I think Zero houses will want things on the Zero app store. Makes a lot of sense. Pricing. I'm curious on the pricing topic. How do you guys evaluate like, sometimes you have an app that's maybe cheaper than another, but I don't think the decision is that simple. Like, let's go with the cheaper one. How do you then like maybe evaluate those two apps? Like one's maybe a bit more expensive, maybe can do a bit more. How do you kind of evaluate that?
Yeah. So
yeah.
It is normally we do kind of a ROI analysis just on the qualitative side. So we determine how much time a task is taking and try to quantify the time savings that is done by implementing this app. But we also consider more qualitative factors as well, such as maybe by launching this app, it'll avoid stress on our team, or it'll reduce the risk of human error because the app is handling a lot of these processes that would have had to be done manually. So we kind of combine all that information, both of the kind of more so the cost analysis plus the qualitative factors. And based on that, we determine which application is most suitable.
Cool. Yeah, I think the idea of like less stress and human error is actually a big one that's sort of hard to quantify. But like if your team's happier using the app, then like that means they can add value elsewhere, just better morale too. So those are harder things to quantify, but yeah, important to touch on. Jules, would love to hear from you on that as well. Like, how do you guys maybe assess that when the prices are different for two similar apps? And then would love to, is there anything in the contract side of things that you guys look for? Whether duration or I think you touched on duration earlier. Would love to dive a bit deeper there.
So I would agree with pretty well everything Emma said there. It's consistent with our own philosophy of how we look at stuff as well. As far as contracts go, a lot of apps really are on a subscription model, so to speak, where it's just a number of users or a number of instances that you have, and then it's a pay per month based on that. And there's not really a contract per se. You could just cancel it at that point. Certainly there are bigger, heavier apps like Zero being a case in point, where, for example, you typically, if you're a CPA firm, you'll sign a business plan with them, which is you agree that you're going to, they're going to give you pricing that's going to cover so many Zero files. You follow? Mm-hmm. But that's relatively unusual. For the most part, it is on a subscription basis. And then, as Emma says, it really comes down to are you going to get quantitative and qualitative value out of it that makes it worthwhile? And there's a good degree of judgment in that. We've been cautious because we've been burned once or twice that we have gone down the path and we've taken on an app and it's become embedded in our technology stack, and then all of a sudden the price triples 6 months later as well. So you do want to sort of consider whether or not the introductory price really is too good to be true.
Right.
And it might be okay for 6 months, and then like, oh, ow, okay. And then you start to look at it and say, can we actually, do we have to swallow this? Can we pass it on to clients who won't like it? Or is this one way to say, that's it, we're done? So, yeah, the things like that, you have to be looking ahead. And unfortunately, those typically aren't baked into contracts. For many apps, it's just, oh, by the way, our prices are going up next month.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good one. I mean, apps do raise their price. Like Plooto, we're pretty transparent. We did raise our price last year after a few years. It kind of sometimes has to happen with the market and stuff like that. But you can always look, Google pricing history or price changes and with that app partner, and you can find like the press releases and the news and stuff like that to see how those prices might have changed. But super helpful. I think Anthony and Kyle, I'd love to ask you guys this one because it's something that I talk about with clients as well. We're a Series B tech startup, and when we're talking to like U.S. clients, for example, there's Bill, and then in Canada there's like some of the banks and stuff like that, and RBC PayEdge, who are just larger organizations. So in terms of like that stability and reputation, that's something we're always trying to keep in mind when we're talking to people. But for you guys, both companies that have been started, I think in the last 10 years or so, how do you maybe speak to that? Is that a question you get often about like, how you guys are backed or like the future stability? Last year, I think like a lot of tech companies went through layoffs and stuff like that. So how do you guys maybe address some of those questions, or what's something that you might share with people on a demo or on a call? And we'll start with maybe Anthony. We'll hear from you, and then Kyle.
Yeah, great question. So the key thing is we need, as a software company, you need to be transparent, right? You need to have do we have a roadmap? Are we constantly providing updates? What is the plan to onboard a customer? How do we build trust with your customers? And we do have an open roadmap, right? And we put it right in the middle of our platform where anybody can access. So we showcase what we're working on. We do weekly updates in the platform. So there's an update section that everyone can reference to inside of that roadmap. But we also accept ideas or feedback to be able to collect um, from the community what features they want to see inside of Financial Sense. So we get the customer involved, and again, we just continue to build on that relationship, build the trust with our customers. Again, I mentioned earlier, our social media presence is increasingly it's increasing at a very rapid rate, and we engage them inside of our social media, right? We submit polls. We ask, how should we handle a specific new feature we're thinking about, or we listen to their pain points. And I think that's the key thing, just being transparent, building trust with your customers for a fairly new organization, and also just make them feel a part of the journey.
Yeah, no, I think that's, as newer startups potentially, and I've been in the startup space for a while, is like that relationship that you have with your customers. If you can show them that, hey, we're taking your feedback seriously, here's what we're working on, and build that really close relationship, that's super important to building that trust. Kyle?
Yeah, thank you. I obviously agree with what Anthony touched on there, just being as transparent as possible. I mentioned at the start, during the introduction, we try to be as consultative as possible. Myself, for example, I've worked at one of our competitors actually, and it was just night and day in terms of the approach. So it's been very refreshing to come to Wagepoint and to be able to take that approach. And that starts with our CEO right at the top, Shrad, who started the company, and he's puts a big emphasis on being transparent with our clients as well. Wagepoint, I was very proud to say, actually, through the tough times that the world went through the pandemic and everything. And this is something I would just be transparent about on calls with clients or potential clients. there was no layoffs with Wagepoint during the pandemic. We found a way to keep everyone on board, and that's just a testament to the type of company we are and the position we were in. I also touched on, we're in a position now where we are acquiring companies, and that would be another avenue where I would lean on as well, just to show that we are, in a financial position, which always hasn't been the case, as we all know, with startups, right? There's a lot of ups and downs, and to be in that position now to be acquiring companies, and have that backing, it makes me proud to say that, and to be a part of. But again, like what Anthony touched on, I personally, if I was try to put myself in the client's shoes, I can totally understand why they're asking these questions, and I would want to give an answer that that I feel would be applicable to something that I would expect back as well, in those shoes when in a position to buy. So try to take that into consideration when providing as much details as I can towards them.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think layoffs are, we were fortunate, didn't have to go through that as well. And it definitely shows just smart, if you're building a software for accountants and bookkeepers, you as a technology partner should have your financials in order, and, being capital efficient, being responsible, so that you don't have to go through those ups and downs and, show instability. So that's something we talked to as well, along with like, hey, this is, the funding we've raised, this is how long we've been around, this is how many customers we have to date. Curious, Emma and Jules, have you guys ever been in a position where, you were looking at a company's, two different companies, one was newer, perhaps one was more established, the product, maybe the newer one was better, or on par with the other one. How'd you make a decision there? Did you ever say, hey, let's go with the newer product versus like the established player, like the incumbent? And what helped you make that decision when you were like looking at not a David versus Goliath, but maybe like a bigger David and a smaller Goliath? We'll put it that way.
It's going to depend on the situation of what you're looking at, and also bluntly how mission critical this app is going to be. You don't want to foul up on anything, but there are some foul ups that would be particularly worse than others, if you can see what I mean, in terms of number of clients you got using it, how pervasive, and also what's the exposure on it. And it sort of comes down to the sort of, do you go with the incumbency thing, like nobody got fired for buying Microsoft, as the cliche is, and incumbency has come very quickly in this field, like Wagepoint is an incumbent now, for example, whereas a few years ago you wouldn't have been. So it's, the conversation has moved much more quickly as to who is the better established one, who isn't. We would be very, very cautious about going with a company that's really in the brand new, very no track record, if it's anything where there is significant exposure, unless a client has come to us and said, I'd really like to explore this one further. The concerns are simply because a company that's younger, although they may have a better product, it's superficially a better product, and it may do flashier things, but you ultimately need those things behind it. You need to know that the integration has been properly tried and tested. Things like the really, really boring stuff like sales tax integrates correctly. You also do need to understand where they are on security. And by security, I mean both protection of data against falling over and accidentally getting lost, or security as in being hacked and so forth. So yeah, you do need to be satisfied that you've got minimal levels of comfort with the vendor the app that you're looking at, and then really your decision depends on how lucky you feel today, how comfortable you feel with it. But I mean, in security, two-factor authentication, that's a price of admission for us. If you haven't got that, if you're not big enough to have that, then yeah, thanks, bye.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like, figure out what's your like minimum threshold.
Yeah.
And we've had folks pilot it for a couple months with a certain client first. Like, you don't have to bring all your clients at once, and then to build that comfort for yourself. Emma, I saw you smiling at when Jules said sales tax. So I'll actually pass over to you, and we'd love to hear maybe from your experience, like maybe with a situation like that.
Yeah. Similar to Jules, like if we do have a shiny diamond, it's not something that we totally just go full-fledged forward with. We definitely do our research. We wait till it gets to a certain growth phase that we do have the trust that it will be sustainable and will be able to be utilized across multiple clients. Another thing just to consider is the amount of resources that it does take to migrate from an older app to a new up and coming app. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of planning, and a lot of just troubleshooting after the fact to make sure that everything's working smoothly with that new application. So it is quite a decision, and definitely not something that happens quite like often to completely change to a new and upcoming application. But it does happen, and you do want to make sure that you are putting people on the applications that best suit them. So typically, if we do have this situation that comes, we will implement it on new clients coming to us through onboarding. And as their experience is great with that application, then we'll migrate older clients that have been using maybe a more dated application in which this is a better solution for them.
Cool. So yeah, you should start with like, it's a newer client. They're not on the existing one yet. You want to try that out with a new one, and then if it works out well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If I may just add on, I would agree again with everything Emma said, but I would also add the one caveat that what you need to be very careful about is not creating a garden which is a riot of different flowers, so to speak, which is why you find firms specialize in, say, Xero or QBO. You can't be expert in all of them, and everybody has their quirks or their different ways of doing it. So you do have to make a decision that these are going to be the absolutely core things, and it's got to be an extremely good reason for us to divert out of that, because otherwise you've got infinitely tailored processes, you've got infinitely varied work practices for different clients, and at that point, that's the start of a deterioration, as it were. So yep, absolutely explore new apps, but be very cautious about adding duplicates to your stack unless there's a really, really good reason for it.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to like that idea we talked about at the beginning of like complexity in the space. Like, you double the complexity the moment you have two apps that kind of do the same thing for you. A couple other things here, and I'll actually jump into getting into that checklist of questions that will also be available after this. So for anyone taking notes, or you don't have to take notes, but I think we talked about the first three bullets there, but the fourth one, implementation lift, training and support offered. Are you going to get someone to help you along the way? If you have to train new folks on your team, are you going to be able to do that? Can you leverage the app partner to actually support, new hires on your end? And then what's the support for troubleshooting and technical issues after the fact? Like they have, email, phone, and live chat, I think are like the baseline today. What are those hours if you're on the West Coast versus East Coast? That can sometimes pose a challenge too. So just making sure that, you are well supported from a human perspective as well. Obviously, you want the product to solve it. You want the price to be good. You want the company to be reputable. But, when you need in a crunch, can you get that support that you need? And then I think the last one here that Jules talked about is like security. If you want that, you can set up 2FA. You are dealing with sensitive information of your clients and stuff like that. So you don't want someone to leave their laptop at a coffee shop. What's the timeout period and things like that. So what are the security practices they have in place, and what kind of certifications are there? How they compete with the industry standards and stuff like that. So those are some of the areas. I'm going to jump into. I'll pause there. Any other areas that we didn't cover here from our panelists? Anthony or Kyle, anything that you're like, hey, we often talk about this, but with customers, but I didn't include on here.
So from our perspective, at least, one thing that we talk about often, and it's not directly to the like necessarily with the employer, but it's how does this help my employees? So from a payroll perspective, what I mean by that is what does their employee portal look like? How do they access their pay stubs? So, looking at this, we would implement the client or the partner, bookkeeper, accountant, but a lot of times, as long as their main needs are getting hit, they're happy, but it goes further than that. The employees are the one that are actually getting paid, that actually need the tax documents, that actually need the pay stubs, etc. So just in relation to how it affects and helps them as well.
Right. So like the client of your client.
Essentially, yes, correct.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's for us too. It was similar. Like, we look at vendors that we pay, like what's the vendor experience look like of our clients is something, to think about too. So it can depend, like, again, this checklist will be, I guess, dependent on like what area of your firm you're looking at software for, what the focus of your firm is. So yeah, it's meant to be a starting point, I think, for anyone listening in. I'll jump into things. So I think like these are some of the questions that we you want to check off. So understand the background of the company. How did they get started? Shrad, why did he start Wagepoint? Sharam, why did he start Financial Sense? Why are they doing what they do? And do they understand their customer? Because that's really going to dictate, are they going to continue to evolve and stay close to that customer at the end of the day? You have your reputation here. So looking at ratings and reviews on those software review sites, like I said, talking to peers and people you might meet at a Xero or QuickBooks event, or I think Accountex is one in Toronto that's coming up, and Ignite. So those are great opportunities to kind of just do a little bit of market research in an easier way than going through a bunch of articles or Googling. How many customers do they serve today, and the stability, comes back to that reputation and future outlook for the company. Security, you want to think about like encryption, if they're dealing with like bank account information, what security certificates do they have, where do they store their data, two-factor authentication, and then geographically, are they available where you are? If you're in the US or Canada, sometimes you might not have the full set of features available to you. So just keeping that in mind. And then company values is one I've heard about too, that people think about is like, okay, how is this company actually built? That plays into that stability and reputation of the company too. But I'll pause there and see, like, Emma or Jules, anything that you guys would add about just the company in general that you would look at?
Yeah, I think we already kind of mentioned this, just the support that they're providing, the customer service, that's a huge aspect. Especially when you are partnering with them as an accounting application, or as an accountant, you want to make sure that they are providing you with the level of support that you need in order to fully service your clients. So just having that value of taking into an account their clients and the companies that they're working with, and really providing that priority support is really important.
Cool.
I think that sort of links in also to the company values, which we talked about quite a bit. Carl spoke about, the story with Wagepoint, as it were, and, the friendliest payroll company around. And that is a thing. And it's you got to say, when you're going through this app dating process, so to speak, is it actually a conversation, or can you tell it's a sales pitch? You can tell pretty quickly if it's a sales pitch, whereas we find it's the conversation you have. Are the people are the representatives asking the good questions? Are they seeking to know about you, or it's just, here's a product, we're pushing for it, we're trying to push for it? So we certainly find that the alignment of values and philosophy, for want of a better word, are as much as the other elements to it as well. Yeah. I just see Bianca's added a comment in the chat there. We're not finding downtime as much of an issue these days as it used to be. Baseline reliability seems to be, again, almost a price of admission, but obviously you'd want to look and see if there's any history of catastrophic failures.
Totally. Yeah, like going through like just like historical news articles, LinkedIn posts and things like that. For us, the SVB collapse had an impact on our clients. Like, how did the company handle that? Is something that you can go back and always look at as well. Cool. I'm gonna jump to the next slide, and then I'll ask Kyle and Anthony if there's anything else. But I think we talked about this, pricing and the potential for return on investment. So that return can either be, it allows you to unlock new revenue. Maybe you have to go after new clients, spend more time sourcing new clients because you're not bogged down in like, manual work. Or is it, primarily just existing cost saves? So you don't necessarily have to hire an additional person or hire another co-op student or whoever it may be. Nothing against co-op students. We hire a bunch, but can you save some money there? And that also contributes to your return on investment. And what does a contract look like? Is it annual versus month to month? The commitment that you'd be locking yourself into. We actually don't, I think like for a lot of Xero and QuickBooks app stores, like people don't often ask this stuff. But it is something that is important to know. And, a lot of companies do a free trial as well before you even get started. I think those were a couple of things just at the end here in terms of like the product itself, like how easy is it to get started with it? How does it integrate with your tech stack? The implementation support, and then post implementation. Some companies will set you up and then you'll never hear from them again. We definitely have someone who one of the technologies we use, I won't say the name, but like, they're the biggest players, so we kind of have to use them. But we hear about from them every 12 months just before our renewal. And then we don't hear from them again. So what does that support look like? Are you building that relationship? Are you able to like schedule that demo like Emma mentioned, where you can learn about new features that they launched and new products? Do you have that access to their team afterwards? Anthony or Kyle, anything that you would add on there?
I wholeheartedly agree with ease of use. One of the important things is, can my employees easily adopt this new system, or will they attempt to use it and stop using it after a couple of months? Even if set SOPs are created or standard sets of instructions are created, adoption is very important when looking for a new software company. And even as a software provider, we need software to help run the business as well. So we also have our own checklists to make sure that we have proper compatibility with other software in our current tech stack. And aside from employees adopting the system, but also something that was mentioned earlier was your clients. Are they able to use the system, or am I also having to train my clients in order to use the system? Or is it easy and user intuitive to log in and figure out how to do things yourself? So just to touch on ease of use there a bit.
We often see sometimes now in job posts, like familiarity with Plooto is a plus. We don't like to think of ourselves. We think we're pretty easy to use, and I do think we are. But there is a learning curve with every app, and so like the easier it can be to get started, the better. Kyle, anything on your end?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Anthony touched on ease of use, so I'll touch on the pricing side, and it kind of ties into ease of use in a way. Like I've seen clients and partners reach us to us, and everyone has a different kind of view on how they want things set up, right? And whether that means they want to facilitate the payroll on behalf of their clients, and they utilize Wagepoint, the discounted billing feature that we have for our partners. We can also bill their clients directly. So it's really kind of what works best for them, but that's a big part of their checklist too, right? And a lot of partners will come to us and say, sometimes my clients don't even know I'm utilizing Wagepoint. I'm getting the peace of mind out of it to know that I don't have to file the T4s or the ROEs. And in a way, the partner looks like the champion to the client still, and that's totally cool as well. If that's someone's prerogative and that's the need that they see fit for what their business needs are. But certainly agree with everything that's been outlined on the checklist. They all could ring a bell to me. I've had multiple conversations on every one of those with different clients and different spectrums.
Awesome. Just a reminder, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We do have a couple minutes here. We got one last slide, and then we can jump into some other questions. If not, I have a fun question for the end for our panelists. But what to ask for in a demo? I mentioned that we put together something that you can walk away with out of a demo. Oftentimes you'll see a deck, or they'll put together a one-pager that they'll share with you with a lot of good succinct information. So you can always ask for that. It helps when then going back and making that decision internally after the fact, or if you have to talk to another stakeholder at your firm or another team member before you make that decision. Always having like those talking points there for yourself are super helpful. You can ask about security articles. I know we have like a white paper on our website just outlining everything security related for folks. So that can be vetted by your IT team or an IT member on your side. The pricing breakdown, some people can be a little bit, cloak and dagger with the pricing, whereas some are a bit more transparent. But just make sure you know what your pricing is. I've been in demos myself where I was talking to a vendor that we were looking to implement for us, and I walked away and I'm like, I don't even know the price. But something just to keep in mind that you make sure you ask for that. Any articles they share in a demo or bring up, always good to have. Testimonials, case studies, any recent news about the company are always good things that you can come out of with and will help make your decision. I'm going to ask a last question to the panelists here. So Kyle and Anthony, what's been the most unique demo or interesting demo that you guys have been on? I'll give you a minute to think about that question. And then Emma and Jules, on the other side for you guys, what was like what's the best demo you've ever been on? What did they do? What did you really appreciate walking out of that you're like, wow, I'm impressed? So we'll start with Anthony and Kyle. We'll keep it to 30 seconds, and then we'll wrap up.
So the most interesting demo I've been a part of is a customer that had about 30 to 40 to 35 different needs and nice to have features in an application, and just using that information to tailor the demo experience for them, and show them the value of the product or the capabilities of the product, what we can do and cannot do off of that list. It was a very productive call, very successful outcome, and we were able to showcase the customer based off of their existing needs and wants list.
35 different. That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's longer than the checklist.
That is a very lengthy call as well, but we had a good outcome towards the end of that call.
Kyle?
Yeah, I guess one that sticks out to me. I mean, there's been a ton, some comical, some didn't go so well. But one that stuck out to me, and I actually had to do it outside of working hours due to it was a company in Australia that was setting up a Canadian entity, and they were completely brand new to Canadian payroll. So we had to go back to the very basics, I guess, if you will, and kind of start from scratch, as in someone who doesn't know anything about Canadian payroll. Because it was so new to them, they had a big chunk of the company or decision makers there. So as a younger account rep at the time, kind of getting my feet wet, it was a little bit intimidating, I guess you could say, but they were very nice. It went well. They ended up moving forward with Wagepoint. It was just quite the process to get them to communicate with the time difference. It felt like it took us one email a day at the time to then set up the demo, and then it was moving slow in that pace. So but it went well in the end, and it was something I'll never forget.
And then your manager's asking, why is that account taking so long to come?
Exactly, right? And it's like, well, I only got one email from them today, or I was only able to communicate this to them, and but it all worked out.
Cool. Emma?
Yeah, for me, I would say float or float cards it really solved a big pain point that we had on our end, just with the not always stable bank feed problem and having to get bank statements for our clients. Just having everything housed in one application and really being able to streamline that process across a lot of our clients was very exciting. So that demo, I know there was kind of similar applications available in the US, but having that functionality available in Canada was really exciting for sure.
Flow people are awesome. I love being next to them at an event. Like, they're a good time.
Yeah, for sure.
Jules?
Yeah, well, I'd agree with Emma that when we had the floats and the float card demo, we had high fives in the in the meeting rooms afterwards. That was a good demo in terms of it really helped solve a problem for us, and I agree totally with Emma. As far as what made a demo stand out, though, I think you've probably gathered that integrations is a thing for us. We've had painful experiences and so forth. So one of the things that we always ask, which is a grossly unfair thing to ask in a demo, is, can you show us the integration? Because everybody says, yes, it integrates with QuickBooks, and yes, it integrates with Xero or whatever, but can you actually show it to us? And there was one vendor who had it, and I honestly can't even remember what the app was at this point in time. It turned out we didn't need it. We didn't go for them for this reason, but they said, yes, we can. And they actually had a sandbox account where they could show something from their app going into Xero. I was like, that's impressive. So it is more than just, yes, of course it integrates. They actually showed me. So that was a really strong point of that demo. We actually gave them feedback specifically on that point afterwards as well.
That's awesome. I'm taking some notes here. I might just book a demo with Float after this for my own learning. But thank you all for this has been awesome. The slides will be sent out. The recording will be available online. If you have any questions, reach out to us after. I've got some more information if you want to reach out to Plooto. That's us. Feel free to email us at partners@plooto.com. Financial Sense. I don't think I have their email here, but I believe we can. You'll find a way to get a hold of them. And Wagepoint as well if you need any more information. And with that, I'll actually just share our next session, which is going to be in September, just after the long weekend for folks in Canada, or the week after the long weekend. So September 13th, I believe, is the date. We're going to be talking about how to leverage reports in your accounting software in Wagepoint, Plooto, Financial Sense to unlock client success. So how can, we talked about, in that first demo, you'll only take away so much about an app and what it can do. So how to use it to its fullest potential. This will be a really good session for that. So with that, thank you, everyone. Thanks for everyone for joining in. I hope you have an awesome rest of your Wednesday. In Toronto, it looks like the sun has come out a little bit. This morning it was cloudy. So yeah, I hope everyone has a great afternoon.